Hi, I'm Joe Farace. I'm here with Barry Staver in his studio today, and we're answering your questions. And the number one category of questions that we get is about lenses. And specifically the questions we get are, what's your favorite lens? So I'm going to ask you, Barry, what's your favorite lens?
Boy, my favorite, Joe, that's a tough one sometimes because we've all got a favorite for one reason or another. As a professional, when I'm doing work for clients, I'm loving this portrait lens. It's the equivalent of an 85 millimeter lens on the full frame camera. It's the Lumix, the Leica Lumix lens for the Panasonic, and it's a 1.2 lens. So it's bigger, it's heavier.
More expensive.
And it's more expensive. But for me, I need this to get the kind of quality images for portraits that my clients expect.
Wow.
I know there are some smaller ones.
Yeah, speaking of,
Yeah, what do you got?
it's interesting. My first lens is also not an 85, it's a 45 millimeter, which gives me, I guess, the equivalent of 90 millimeters, which is a good portrait lens. But significantly different than yours. This is an Olympus 85 1/8.
So hold that up here.
And so,
Wow. So we're talking the same focal length
yes.
and basically the same aperture.
Well, it's a 1/8. Yours is a 1/2. I mean,
But to me, that's not a big deal.
this is like a $300+ lens.
Oh, $1,600.
Wow.
Okay, there's a huge difference there. That's like what, 4 times?
Yes, but the way Olympus gets you is the lens hood, which I assume is standard here, was optional. This is a $7 lens hood I got on Amazon. The Olympus lens hood is $28, and for the black one, the lens is also available in black or silver, and the silver lens hood is $36, I think.
Well, see, you could think of it this way. My lens hood was free. All I had to do was buy a $1,600 lens.
That's true.
It is.
What I use this lens for mostly is when I'm working in the studio. In fact, the other lens I'm going to show you is what I use in the studio too, to do portraits. The 1.8 aperture comes in really handy when I'm working with LED or maybe fluorescent lights. Mm-hmm. And I also make sure that typically, although this lens is compatible with your Panasonic or my Panasonic, so, I always use it with an Olympus body because of the image stabilization. I find that lots of times I'm shooting at very high ISOs. There's a blog post on that, and I'll mention it below in the links. And a lot of high ISOs, and I'm often shooting wide open. So a combination of the wide open, the image stabilization helps me keep both the ISO, maybe the aperture a little bit under control. Mm-hmm. So it's my number one portrait lens when I'm working with LED like these or fluorescents.
Okay. Well, I use mine in much the same way. This has certainly image stabilization.
I was going to ask you about that.
Built into the lens. But when I'm on the tripod, which I'm almost always am in portrait work, I turn that off because the tripod keeps it stable enough.
Wow.
These wide apertures are great when you're shooting video, especially if you're doing some autofocus video, because that just lets that much more light get back to that sensor to help keep things in sharp focus. Whether it's the 1.2 or the 1.8 that you've got, like I said, it's not a deal breaker. Those are because I'm often shooting at f2 with my portrait, so that's just plenty. That's all we need. So that's a favorite lens in the working world.
So what's your next favorite lens?
You know what I'll do next is I'm going to jump to another prime lens, a non-zoom lens, and I'm going to put on this little Leica 15 millimeter. It's a 1.7. So that's an equivalent of 30 millimeters when you're talking the full frame sensor. This is great, again, because it's the fast aperture. It's a fabulous street lens because I'm out on the street with this and I don't look like a professional photographer. And it's easy to shoot from the hip. I use this at events as well as this at events because, again, in low light, I want that fast glass.
So what is it? It's a 1.7?
It's a 1.7. And, you know, I've never owned a Leica in all my 40 plus years of photography, but now I've got Leica lenses on this little mirrorless camera, and I think that's just cool.
I use Leica lenses on, like, in fact, there's a blog post, actually it's up today in our time, not when you're watching this. I'll put a link in there about using manual focus Leica lenses on mirrorless cameras.
Oh, okay.
So
what have you got?
my next favorite lens, and this is again the one I use in the studio, is a what used to be the kit lens. It's the 14 to 45, not to be confused with the 14 to 43, which is the current kit lens for Panasonic. The big difference is the word around the water cooler. We're talking to all the people who know this stuff. This is a sharper lens. Now the 14 to 43 with image stabilization that's currently available is a second generation lens. I don't know how good that is or whatever, but one of the big differences, this has a off-on switch for the image stabilization. And whereas the new lens, you have to go into the camera menu and turn the image stabilization off and on. I use this in the studio when I'm working with strobes. I'll be shooting at f8 because the apertures are really slow. This is like a 3.5, 5.6, so it's a pretty slow lens compared to your 1.7. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm shooting, typically in the studio, I'm shooting anywhere from f8 to f11. When I'm doing portraits, I like them to be sharp. And this is a really sharp lens. Came with a lens hood. I got this because it's no longer manufactured. I got this through eBay from a camera store in Osaka, Japan. And it's just very flexible because not only can I do a nice portrait lens at 45 millimeter length, but I can also do some almost full length shots at the 14 millimeter ends in my very small studio, which is only 15 feet from back wall to back wall, which means that you got your background that encroaches on the space. So I don't have the full 15 feet, but I can almost do full lengths with this lens. So it's like my favorite lens for shooting with flash.
Okay. So, you've got favorites that you use for work and as well as just for fun too. And I think as you get more lenses, perhaps more than just a kit lens that came with the camera, it's kind of fun to experiment. And I'll tell you the best way to do it if you got a camera store in your town is to go in and compare. Because when I was deciding on this, whether I wanted to spend $1,600 or not, I went to the store and I put this lens on the camera and I put in my card and I shot images with this.
In the store or outside?
No, I went in the store.
Uh-huh.
I put on the Lumix lens and this Leica lens for the Lumix. And I shot things around the store at low ISO and slow shutter speed. And some close-ups. I went up and shot close-ups of some packaging and wide shots, and I put them on my big monitor. And
this so you came home then?
Yeah, I came
and looked
back
at them
home
on your computer?
You bet. The difference on these primes versus a zoom is it makes you work harder. It's easy to get lazy with a zoom lens, and maybe someday we'll talk more about zooms.
I think it's a good idea.
The prime lens is what was used back in the day exclusively. I remember my newspaper days, you had two camera bodies and two lenses. This kind of medium telephoto and a wide-angle lens, and you put one on each shoulder, some rolls of film in your pocket, and you went out, and that's how you took care of your assignments for the day. So it's fun to come full circle and come back around to this.
Well, there's no doubt that the myth, of course, is that prime lenses were sharper than zooms, but I think that's been buried long ago.
Oh, I, for the most part, agree. I mean,
for the most part. Well, I mean, that to me means there are some zooms that are probably worthless.
There were.
And are worthless. And there are some zooms that are perfect. But that also means you probably are paying some good money for those more high-quality zooms.
Well, you are. And then it gets into the maximum f-stop of zooms, whether it's a fixed f2.8 or whether it's that 49
or like this lens, 3.5 to 5.6, which is why the lens is so small and why it was a kit lens and not very expensive.
Exactly.
So the world of lenses, as you can see, is a big, crazy one. And we may visit this subject again because I think it's one that's our number one requested topic to talk about and questions I get from readers. But I would invite you all to send us, click the contact button up there somewhere, and send us your questions, and we will get to them in our next podcast. Barry, you have any final words?
There are just a lot of choices out there. So pays to do a lot of research. So you spend your money wisely to get what's going to work for the kind of photography that you do.
Well, great. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you, Barry.
Sure, Joe.
It's been fun. Let's do it again.
All right.